Hello everyone, it's Judy from Coffee, Cookies, and Books, and what we're doing today is Deep Dive Episode 3, where we talk about We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver and This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. So hopefully you'll stick around for our analysis of our next set of chapters, which are in the description below. All right, so we are going to start with We Used to Live Here, and the chapters that we are looking at. The one chapter is Hide and Seek, which is technically chapter 3, and it is the chapter that follows from where we left off. And where we left off was with the daughter Jenny going missing, and them realizing that she's in the basement. Now, of course, Eve hates basements, doesn't want to go down there. At this point in time, Charlie still has not come home, so we don't know where Charlie is for sure. Hopefully she's going to get home soon enough, but in the meantime, Thomas talks Eve into going down into the basement. They have flashlights, so they do head down there. Eve suggests that all of them go down and look, but Thomas is like, the more dramatic our response, the longer she stays hidden. Now, I think Jenny's 7. I'm trying to remember now. She's young. No child goes into a basement. Now, as we go through this chapter, these things really stand out to me as super odd. Jenny's desire to be down there is odd. So we'll state that right from the beginning. Now, she's basically taken the dumbwaiter that was up on the top floor all the way down to the basement. So that's how she's ended up there, and that's how they've determined that that's where she is. So just to clarify that this is how Jenny's gotten into the basement when they were distracted, okay, which was in the earlier chapter. Okay, so what we've got is they're going down. Now, there are a couple of paragraphs right in the very beginning of this chapter, like these 2 paragraphs, okay, that are Eve's description of how she views the basement. So, because Eve doesn't like basements. They creep her out. They're very scary. Even though she's going down there with someone else, this is all in her head, of course, right? And she talks about creaky steps. She talks about the texture on the wall and it being like coarse and sandpaper. Like, none of it is a positive description. She talks about the air being dense and humid. She talks about it having a metallic taste, which you and I both know that's all in your mind. It's sour, like bark mulch after a rainstorm. The dampness had sunk into the beams above, lending them slick, glistening sheen. And then what goes through her mind at the end is all the more reason to tear the house down, because this is something that, of course, her and Charlie are contemplating. We have discussed this before. She didn't tell Thomas this, of course, because this is Thomas's home where he grew up. When they get downstairs, they confirm that the dumbwaiter is sitting there and the door to it is open and it's empty. So obviously Jenny's gotten downstairs and she's somewhere in the basement. So they decide to split up to look for her, which in itself is creepy. Like, if you read through these chapters on the things that are going through Eve's mind as she navigates through the section that she's searching, the whole basement's creepy as hell, okay? And there are there's little things, but the one thing that really comes to my mind is she grabs a flashlight and skulks over, and there are more ants. Now, if you remember, there was an ant on the outside of the basement door. Now, I don't think these are large carpenter ants. These are normal, regular sized ants. And they're spilling out of a crack in the plywood, is what she says here. So but then they're all moving in the same direction. She's trying to remember what she's heard about ant behavior, which this would be your typical domestic ant, right? Like ones that you've seen that come out of the little mounds on the ground, that kind of thing. Like they're just your regular ant. But the ants lead Eve to what she thinks is a perfect hiding spot in an area that's like, it's like this, the whole backyard, the whole basement is sectioned off, but very long. And the one comment Thomas makes is that the basement extends past the foundation of the house, which I find really unusual. I also find it unusual that it's sectioned off everywhere. Like when you read through it, I don't think it's just creepy because of the way Eve is describing it. I think that the general consensus is that the basement itself has a creepy feel to it. It's very odd construction for how you would create a basement. And everybody knows that the foundation of your house is built on top of the basement. And the likelihood is that your basement's smaller than the foundation of the house. Smaller than the build of the house, because the foundation is in and it's more solid. But with it like this, like he says that, and her description is like, this basement's never endless. Like never endless, right? Okay, so anyways, then she finds an odd painting in the basement, and it is a painting of a chocolate lab. Now, you might recall that Thomas says they had a dog, but then in the documentation at the end, okay, it says a free chocolate lab to a good home, 2 years old. Now, are they giving the chocolate lab away? Or is that when they got the chocolate lab? Like it's all very bizarre, and the time frames are odd on that. So anyways, I just thought that was unusual. I don't know what the relevance is, but then with the chocolate lab being brought up again in this, and the fact that Eve describes the painting as evoking a sense of dread, wasn't the sort of thing Eve would hang up anytime soon, but the artists, whoever they were, undoubtedly had skill. If this was a work of Thomas's mother, he was selling her short, because he mentioned that she was an artist, but it was a hobby, I guess. That's part of one of the things she finds. And then she continues through the house back towards where she came. And when she gets to a certain point, she finds someone standing in the narrow hallway. Okay. And it's Thomas, but he's just standing there. So her description is, his posture was pin straight, his arms hanging limp, his flashlight, white knuckle gripped in his left hand, was pointed straight down at the floor, casting a tight light of harsh light, half over his shoe, half over the concrete. Thomas, no response. That's her. She calls out to him. He just stood there unmoving. Somehow he looked stiller than the hallway itself. Was he even breathing? Thomas, she stutters. Nothing. Tense, Eve glanced over her shoulder. He was blocking the only way out. She cleared her throat and tried one more time. Thomas, still no response. He just kept standing there like a storefront mannequin frozen in time. If he was trying to scare her, it was working. Should she bolt past him? She took another step closer. Another. She was less than an arm length away when he spun around. Jesus, he says. Right? He set a hand on his chest, startled. You snuck up on me, he paused, clocking her weary expression. You okay? You look spooked. I tried calling your name like 3 times. He smiled apologetically. Yeah, my hearing isn't what it used to be. You're sure you're okay, though? She says, then she tells him, I'm not a fan of basements. But I think that that's unusual. It's almost like, you think Thomas is having an out-of-body experience. Something's happening there. They go to the opposite side of the basement. He crouched in a corner with the light down a gap so narrow even a child would have had to turn sideways just to fit. The gap shone through beams, insulation, and pipes, landing in a small open space. It was likely a remnant of the original layout, a vestigial organ created by the many additions over the years. She's hiding in there, just out of view. Well, shouldn't we call her out? And then he says, Jenny finds Spot, sets up camp, and she won't surrender unless we give her space. So basically, this whole chapter comes down to he's basically saying they need to give her space, and they need to kind of let her come out on her own. And then, she's like, well, didn't he say to grab her earlier? Like, just, if you saw her, just grab her and basically haul her upstairs. Like, the whole thing is very odd. His behavior is odd, but that's a given. And then Jenny's behavior is even odder, if you ask me, because she's in this basement to begin with, but she's moved into this obvious space. Eve keeps questioning the idea of Jenny wanting to stay down there. He keeps saying, oh, don't worry, she'll come up. And then, he turns around and says, Jenny, we're going back up. Jenny. And there's like no response from this kid. Like nothing. And then he starts tapping on the wall. Okay. Like he's making these tapping sounds. And he did that when they first came down into the basement. And Eve didn't think anything of it. But he taps. And then he gets a tap back. It's almost like he's signaling his kid. It just was like the oddest. I remember when I read it the first time, and I thought, what kid that, like a girl especially, is going to do that? And, this is the kid that's walking around with the notebook, and she's taking notes about everything. The whole thing is very odd. Basically, they head up the stairs to leave. And that is where the chapter ends. And then there is a very, very short documentation afterwards. And I'm actually not sure what the relevance of this is. It might come up in the next chapter. It is description adverse from the Yale Courier. It talks about a heavy metal concert. It's a concert that they're talking about at Yale. That's that. And then the Morse code at the bottom is the word with. So we begin to start to, see a bit of a sentence coming up. I think it's the old man with, I think is what we've got so far. At the end, I'll write out the full sentence and we'll have the full sentence. So the plan going forward is that I'm going to try to do more chapters per deep dive. And that'll make the deep dives a little tiny bit longer, but it's going to get us through the book faster. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the next 3 chapters, and there are 2 documentations with that. The last chapter, there is no documentation to it. So this is chapter communion is chapter 4, which I believe is kind of a longish chapter compared to the other chapters. It's quite long. And so let's keep going. Okay. And then after chapter 4, communion, is a documentation, a very small one. Then we have chapter 5, which is Refuge. And I don't think this is a super long chapter. No, that was a very short chapter. Okay, so that's chapter 5. And then there's documentation after that. And then chapter 6 is Old House. Okay, so those are what we're going to read next. So there's going to be a fair bit of reading compared to what we had previously. And we're going to just try and zip through. I mean, I think I said there were 26 chapters. So we're going to do them in batches of 3 or 4 based on whatever we do with This Book Will Bury Me. Because with This Book Will Bury Me, we have to do 4 with each chapter set from this. So that's it for this chapter. I think, the whole thing's very weird with Jenny, but, is Charlie going to come home? We're going to see. It would be great if Charlie came home. I think Charlie needs to get home. But then what happens, when Charlie gets home? Anyway, so that's where we are with it. And now we're going to move on to This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. So let's switch them out. Now we are on chapter 9 through 12. 9, 10, 11, and 12. We ended off with Jane volunteering to go and drive out to the home of the victim that they're all sort of investigating. Indira, I think is her name. She takes this very seriously, and she's got her mom's car, and she heads out to, it's called India Town, which I don't think is very far from Disney. Like I believe the book takes place in the Orlando area. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. So she's got the car, and she heads out, and she basically is trying to determine if the convenience store that was in the area had CCTV footage. That's number 1. But number 2, they're also trying to get better handle on where her home was situated. And they have determined that there's one way in and one way out. So it's not like anybody could get a car in and remove this woman's body, as they're moving her in and out. So that is she basically goes. Now, she doesn't make a lot of headway, but she does talk to the convenience store. She does find out they have working cameras. Obviously, they're not going to give her the footage, but she does find that out. She's thinking she's failed. But in actual sense, when she gets home, it all comes together. Now, when she does get home, the box is sitting there with the ashes of her father. Okay? So this is a pivotal moment for her, because this is there's quite a bit of her conjecture about how he's just ashes. That really bothers her, even though she did see him at the funeral home before they cremated him. It still really bothers her that her father is down to ashes, been burned down to ashes. That, in her mind, she's having a hard time, I think, just juxtaposition of the two things together making her dad, right? But anyways, her mom says that they divided the ashes into 2 so that they'd each have their own set to do with what they wanted. She takes the ashes. Now, it's going to be significant to a point, and we will get to it as we go through these. But what happens is she gets back online, and she tells them that she went, and I'm sorry, I didn't make much headway. I tried to get video, they wouldn't give it to me, blah blah blah. And they're all like, no, you did great, because you found out and confirmed that anybody in and out, unless they're on foot, which is not going to be possible to carry a body, right? They had to be in a vehicle. So that meant somebody came in and out. They tell her, and they basically say they need to call in a tip to the police, which it makes the most sense, right? They then they move into chapter 10, and in chapter 10, it's just her and her mom doing kind of a memorial service, at a public pavilion for her father. And they set everything up, and all his friends and people he worked with, a lot of people showed up. And her mom asked her to talk, and she couldn't do it. She just, I mean, she's an introvert, so that is the type of personality that she has in the first place. So I don't think it's entirely surprising, but it's really a difficult point for her, and she feels she's let her mother down. It seems that this is a trending thing with Jane, is that she's just constantly afraid she's going to let people down. And that's kind of even where she was at with the whole driving to that woman's home, is that she feels she didn't accomplish anything. So, I think that's a bit of a theme through the book, but we'll see. So, chapter 10 was very short, 2 pages. Chapter 11 is after the funeral, and they get back online. And of course, they tease her that she's like a baby in the ranks, right? And, I mean, she is. She's just starting out this kind of online sleuthing thing, and it's new to her, but it's this desire to find out who killed somebody. And I think it's because in her mind, even though she knows her father died because of his health, it's like, but who killed him? What killed him? Why did he die? Like those are constantly in her head. So it's not surprising that she gets kind of worked up about this thing. The police do look into the license plate. They do find out that, what does it say? It says, "Sorry, I'm new. Can you explain what that means?" So it's like the police were looking into all the license plates caught on the footage, but so far they hadn't connected any of them to Indira's acquaintances, other than her neighbors who'd all alibied out. And so, Jane asks, and Jane's name is Searcher24. So that's what she's given herself. 24 is her age. I don't know if I mentioned that in previous videos, but I just wanted to mention that now. It's cute. We have a baby in the ranks. So this is how they view her. They know she's young. Probably they take her age at 28. It says it means Indira either left her condo on foot sometime after Monday, which is weird, or was somehow smuggled out of her house, and none of her known acquaintances drove to her house during the critical window when she disappeared. So they know this information. That means the perp being someone she knew. They're talking about the case, and Jane's got her dad's ashes propped up on the desk beside her because she doesn't know what to do with them. And she's got them propped up there, and she starts talking to him. I mean, I don't think that that's unusual, especially for a young girl who's lost the parent. She was the closest to her father. Her mom and her, it's not that her mom doesn't love her. You can tell that she does, but they have kind of an odd relationship. And I think like her dad was her world. When you read through this and you hear that she's talking to her dad, it really doesn't seem odd. Then they talk about how the woman died. I'm not going to get into the details of that. It's pretty horrific, really. They continue to discuss that. And then we get to a point where they find out a little bit more, like they're trying to find out a bit more about who could have done this to her. Like they say that it could mean our killer was either A, inexperienced, B, physically weaker. They're talking about how the woman died, because they found the woman's body in pieces. You can use your imagination on that one. They wanted Indira to feel pain or any combo of the above. So they're explaining all of this to Jane, right? They're talking about the kind of money this woman earned, because they're saying that it comes down to what's the most logical thing, is always comes down to money, right? But At this point, Jane, they're like, but this woman didn't make a lot of money. She lived on a very limited income. Basically, one of the women says that she's going to check her bank records because even it says here that Indira worked the front desk of an arboretum, making $25 an hour, and all her money went to pay for her mom's retirement home. The woman wasn't a prime financial target. So that's what they're thinking, and that's kind of where this one ends. Now, her mom does come in. She realizes that Jane's got her dad's ashes in a zip-tied bag on the desk with her. Again, Jane's lack of confidence and feeling that she's disappointing her, it comes out again. I think like it's pretty difficult to read those portions of it, but she's saying, "Come on out, we're having fruit for dinner," and Jane's like fruit, and I think what we have is we have Jane sort of in denial and not wanting to let go of her dad, and then you have her mom who is now going to go weird in that they have to eat healthy. They have to do it because of how her father died and his health directly affecting it. So basically, her mom threw out everything that had been in the fridge, the lasagnas, the pot pie, and even her father's Cheerios. She threw everything out. And so I think that's the way her mother responded to the death of her father, which is, it's sad, but it is what it is. And then her mom brings up going back to school. Now, Jane is not going to go back. I mean, we know she's just not going to go back. You can feel that in her here in this, at the end of this chapter. She has no desire. She has now entrenched herself into something new that I think she feels almost more useful. And I don't know, like she feels she's helping or she wants to help. I mean, all of that kind of comes into play. And then we go into chapter 12, which is the last one we read for this vlog part. And that is dealing with the fact that they have determined, one of the people has determined, by looking at Indira's emails. Now, of course, they're all hacking. That's obvious. That's what they're doing. But one thing she forgot to check, she or he, I'm not sure who, but it's a spam folder. In the spam folder, they have realized that Indira won $75,000. Okay, so it's Publishers Clearinghouse, and they're like, "Isn't that a racket? Where? I thought that was gone." Blah blah blah, and they said no. It says it sounded fake to us too, which is why I called Publishers Clearinghouse and confirmed that Indira Bapatunde did indeed win $75,000 to clear your debt sweepstakes. A representative delivered the check to her 2 weeks ago, so they know that this woman got money. Okay. Did the rep say whether she cashed it? He wouldn't confirm that. So our girl came into some money, which means she was a prime financial target. My bad, mistress. You were right. But her bank only had $1,200. And you checked all of her accounts, it's asked. And they're like, "I promise I got it all." So where's Indira's money? That asks Jane. And that searcher is the exact right question. So I'm assuming, I don't know, I can't remember because it's been a while since I read this, but I think they tell the police and that's where it heads from there. But obviously they have found out a huge piece of evidence. If Indira did not cash that check, who cashed it? That's an obvious question. Now we head on to our next set of chapters. So to follow along with that, normally we do 4 chapters per, so that means we have to do 12 chapters. So that is chapter 13 to 24, and I don't think that is that many pages, but we're already at page 51 with the start of chapter 13. And the end of chapter 24 is 108. So that's a 50-page read. Shouldn't be too much. And I won't be doing these, deep dives all that often, maybe it seems to be once every 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. It depends on where I can fit it in with the regular videos I do. Like if I have book hauls and I have the releases video that I do, and I might or might not have book hauls. I mean, I don't do them all the time, usually every 2 or 3 months. But my plan is to do a deep dive at least once a month. So it gives you time to actually read all of this. And if you're one of these people who's reading both these books, well, you can take your time going through them. So that's it for this video. I will post underneath this video the next chapter, again, just as a reminder, so that you have a reference that if you need to fall back on that, you have that. And so, obviously the story is rolling right along. I find this book will bury me moves at a very slow pace, whereas We Used to Live Here moves at a faster pace. But the sizes of the book do make a difference as well, obviously, right? So that's kind of where we're at with it. That's it for this video. I will see you, I guess, in Deep Dive episode 4. So great that you could join us, and I hope you have a really great day.